Hello and welcome to YG Collaborations, the secret to success. And if you're here watching us, you want to know about success and we want to tell you. My name is Yvette Valdenegro and this is my co-host,
Giovanna Burgess-White, and we're super excited to be on today, not only with a podcast expert, but our podcast manager, Haili Murch. But before we bring her on, if you've missed the last few episodes, actually, forget that. But if this is the first time you're seeing us, we are now on Spotify and Apple Play. So if you don't want to watch us anymore, you can listen to us. But we have an amazing podcast manager. We hired her, I feel like 6-7 weeks ago. She took over Just Engage University, and then we surprised her with our baby YG Collaborations. And as you know, we love talking about collabs and how not only we love collaboration over competition, but how you can find the perfect collaborator for you. So I know Yvette and I have so many questions to ask, and you're going to learn everything about podcasts. And I know, Yvette, remember when I told you we were going to do a podcast and you're like, oh my God, what?
No, I was just thinking to myself, what, 18 months ago? I don't even know what okay, first of all, the thought of podcasting scared me to death. The thought of the visual, the audio, the whole 9 yards, it can be very intimidating. I kind of feel like it's the same thing when you tell or ask people, hey, can you do a reel on Instagram or do something on TikTok? They automatically go, what? After time, do I think I'm a perfect? Heck no. But I have so enjoyed the growth process, our guests, the educational side to all of it, the collaboration side to it. And it's crazy how a podcast is such a reference. And that's why I personally think if you're watching this, it's because you read something. It says podcast manager launching expert. Of course, we all want to hear from the experts. What does it take? How do I do this? How do I get started? And no better to bring on than someone we absolutely love and adore and entrust with our little babies to help us. And so this is going to be really, I know I'm going to learn a lot myself, but just anyone who's out there listening, it's not intimidating. And I know that when you meet Haili, you're going to love her. You're going to love her warm heart and everything that she has to say. She's such a joy, but it really, truly has been an amazing, really great experience. And I know she's going to get into like the business side of it, but it is truly amazing how much it really does benefit just someone's business, just the information that gets out to anyone who is listening. So I think it's going to be a great episode.
We like some stats. So in the next 5 years, this is a crazy statistic. Over 80 million people will be working a home-based business. Home-based. So after COVID, all of these crazy things happen where people left the workforce, they're working from home. And so Haili's going to help really just talk through why a podcast will benefit you. Just Engage University podcast launched back in 2018, and I didn't have Haili back then. And so I remember being like that. And now we're on season 3. We have so many amazing episodes. And like you said, it's all about the education, the guests, just being able to learn from others and answering questions. So if you're watching us live, awesome, ask questions. If you're watching or listening to the replay, you can send us, DM us, you can send us, or we can send them directly to Haili. Any questions you have on podcasting, and all of her information are in the show notes. So you can at any time reach out to her and she can help you with starting a podcast. And then she's going to tell you a little bit more on a course that she has as well. So let's bring her on. Haili, welcome.
Hi.
Hi.
It's good to be here. I'm so excited to be on a podcast because I get to listen to them all the time. And it's so fun when I get to go on them. So thank you for having me.
Oh my God, thank you for coming. And I feel like, we do everything around this show, around collaborations and what is the best way to do a collaboration and be on a podcast. So I'm glad that you're on because you're going to be able to answer a lot of questions, not only from, there may be people who never want to start a podcast, but want to be on a podcast, because that's another question that we get asked all the time. And then there's people out there, again, starting businesses, having businesses that want to have tools and resources for their clients and they don't know what to do. And obviously the answer is, a podcast is the way to go. So why don't you just kind of introduce yourself and tell people like how you got into this world and what it is that you do?
Yeah, absolutely. So my name is Haili Murch. I have been doing podcast management for about 3 years now. I originally started just as a general virtual assistant. So for those who might not be familiar with that term, that's just basically somebody who's an admin online for online businesses. So I took a lot of pretty random jobs. I did a lot of Pinterest. I did YouTube. I started with a couple of podcasters. So I was kind of doing a variety of work, and started noticing that I really liked podcasts, that I was really good at it. I actually have a background in sound recording and recording studios. So like just editing and sound was very natural to me. And so I was like, okay, like I get this. Now I understand, the technical side of it. And ironically enough, during COVID, the very beginning of the year, right before COVID happened, I started getting a lot of podcast clients, and I was like, So I basically just shifted my business, and I was like, I think it's podcasts only now. And my business exploded. So the whole like niching down thing I'm like such an advocate for it now, because I saw what happens when you do that. So once I niched down, it was like business exploded. Like my business doubled during a pandemic, which is just really awesome and a huge blessing. I know you guys have your story and kind of have seen like the fruits of that as well. And I feel really blessed because I know that a lot of people suffered during COVID, but to see that you could still have success with a business and with podcasts, kind of like you're talking about, I think some people don't know the impact or what podcasts can do. And so that it's not even an option, but people were at home and with their businesses and didn't know the next step. And guess what? Starting a podcast was most of their next step. And so I found this little hole, and then business just exploded. So since COVID, since last year, I have just been basically focused on launches. I launch people's podcasts. It takes about 4 to 5 weeks. So I have a program set up, and we get people set up, and we get them launched and marketed out. And then I have since hired one person who's on my team, and we tag team doing the management. So the management is more the month to month. And so we kind of split the work, and we take different clients, and that's kind of how we're doing it. So, and then like Gio mentioned at the very beginning, I do also have a course where I teach people how to be podcast managers, because I can't do it all. It takes a lot of time, and there's a lot of dang podcasts out there. So I'm not going to have the time or the resources to do all of that. So I love teaching people. Plus I want women to have the opportunity to create some sort of side business or side hustle if they're looking for additional income, or maybe they're a virtual assistant who also needs to niche down. Is kind of who that's for. And that's been really fun too. So that's kind of how I got into it. That's kind of what I'm up to right now. So
yeah.
Oh my God. Okay, I got a question, because that whole thing was like, oh my gosh. I'm like, okay, I'm listening. I was, like I said earlier, the person who's totally intimidated. So my thoughts are like, do you think that podcasting is for everyone? Like, and what would be some guidelines for someone to be like, how do I even start? Where do I begin? Is this for me? Just kind of from the beginning.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great question. Of course, I'm going to be biased and say, yeah, I think everybody could do a podcast, but I think there's levels to it. I've gotten really confident and comfortable talking to potential clients and discovery calls, because sometimes I sense a vibe when maybe they're not ready. And what I mean by that is like starting a podcast, especially with kind of the way that I have it set up, is like, hey, we've got 4 or 5 weeks and I really need you to focus. Like, we're trying to get you started the best way possible to get your podcast out there so that you have success. And what I saw happen, which I was a little naive with when I started taking launch clients, was people were just taking it because their coaches had a podcast or they were told to start it. And that we would start their podcast. And then at the time, I did not have someone on my team, so I couldn't take everyone. I actually had some other podcast manager friends and referrals that I could send them to. And I would notice their podcast didn't go past the 5 episodes we launched with. And I'm like, why are people not continuing? So then I added to my program a more transitional way to get people more successful out of it, whether they worked with me or not. All of that to say that sometimes people have the wrong idea behind the podcast. And it goes back to like a really simple thing that I have learned from our friend Julie Ciardi, which is like understanding your why. So if somebody's going in there and they're just like, well, I'm just trying to make more money in my business and I'm going to start my podcast, that's not a bad thing. But if that's your only focus, you're not going to be successful in your podcast. And so I make sure that people go into it knowing their purpose, that they're going to have fun with it. Like, this is fun. I know not everybody does the video. I encourage a lot of my clients to use Zoom so that they get the face-to-face or like a StreamYard. But it takes a lot of work and energy that first month is kind of what I'm saying. And so that's how you know you're ready. It's like, okay, I'm ready to put a month of my time into getting this started in a successful way. And then honestly, a podcast managing month to month is a lot easier than your actual launch, which is pretty normal for any business offer or big thing, right? Like a launch, that word is big. And so you kind of have to come into that with a podcast. I also get asked a lot along with that question is like, people who are businesses versus not a business. So somebody's like, well, should I start a podcast? I really like talking about health stuff, but it's not really going to make me money. If you're willing to invest in it and it's going to be like a fun hobby you do that offers collaborations, that opens other doors for other things, why not? Like, so I've had a couple people who it's not directly for their business, but they're willing to pay the investment to kind of see what it does, whether that later helps their business or it opens doors to collaborations with other, I'll use that example again, the health profession, like if they want to make connections, that's a great way to do that. And then for businesses, I just think you have to be ready and smart about your timing. I don't like launching people when they have another launch. I even almost ask them that. I'm like, do you have another launch coming soon? And they're like, oh yeah, I have one in a couple of weeks. And I said, we're not going to do it next month then. We're going to do you the next month because I want them to be able to put the focus they're putting into their personal launch into the podcast, because otherwise you will not see the success. I have seen the night and day difference with people who come in, do the launch with me that are not ready versus the people that have really big success because they do the steps and do everything that I give them to do. And then they're really successful with it. So I hope that answered your question. So that's kind of what I was thinking when you said that. So
I can say this before we had you, and back in 2018, when I started the podcast, it was a huge investment in time, because at the time I didn't have a podcast manager and I kind of just did a self-taught course on how to do it. And I was very lucky to have a good coach for that. But, I remember kicking off the first season and being consistent with it every single week. And it is like time, you have to have that integrity in time. It's putting all of the social media together, putting the show notes together. There is a system in place. And now looking back, we're in 2021. I and Julie Ciardi will tell us this, should have invested in that first, because it was time that took away from my business. It served it 100%. It is a tool. Like when I tell people all the time, like what's the number one purpose for it? It is an educational tool. It is a free resource for your clients. And I saw a huge need for education with engaged couples. And now, we have an ebook, we have 3 seasons of a podcast. And when we meet couples, we provide something for them for free. And nobody in our industry is doing that. But then with this podcast, there's so many people in our industry that this crosses over, right? You can, the collaboration piece of it. We have small, business women that come on. We have actually partners, all, coming onto this that are just really talking about their collaborations and what they're doing. And again, it's a free tool and it does serve our businesses, right? The bigger picture. So I want people to understand that there is commitment for time and there is commitment for money if you want it to be done right. And that's, what, when Yvette and I were like, we cannot, 3 years into one and then starting this one, be doing that. We have to pass it on to the experts. So when people are looking, and my advice is like virtual assistants and podcast managers, like those are the things that are going to be the biggest return on investment, because you're going to spend a lot of time doing it yourself and it's going to take away from the money, the productive activities. It's going to make money for your business. But my God, it's been so easy. Like you said, the first initial 5 episodes, the art, the social media, all that it's like, oh, whoa, we hated doing it. But now it's just so,
yeah.
No offense to us and our, we always say our media, social media, our personal assistants that are running around, that really is me, myself, and I, and Gio, herself and herself. That no bad kudos to those wonderful people who've been doing everything. But Haili, I noticed such a difference the minute you started helping. I was like, wait, what? Like it just takes it to a whole new level. And I think that podcasting too, it's almost like it can be like a little mini talk show. Yes, you get creative. And we like to do everything, live. We like to do everything that it's not really, and we've told you, don't necessarily edit stuff because it is what it is. And we want to be real, and we make mistakes and we're not perfect. And that's part of the whole process of realizing, hey, everybody out there, you're not perfect. Your business isn't going to be perfect. You may say something that's crazy, but that's a live and learn, and you move on. It's like not that big of a deal. But it has been, what I was saying, it's kind of like a little talk show. And the reason I feel like people like to tune in, because you tune in and can tune out. You can stop it. You can come back to it. You can listen to it in your car. You come back when you're running around doing errands. If it's captivating and it's keeping your attention, you're learning, but you're learning in a process that isn't like the mundane, like we did in school. You're learning live, real-time information from people who are experiencing stuff. And then they're just telling it to you. Like if you're having coffee with them, with the person who's sharing. So it's also it makes you feel like it's one-on-one, because you're listening to that person. And I like the visual. I'm a total visual person. I want to see, facial expressions and how people receive what you're saying. But it's just such a great platform.
Yeah. Well, and I think Gio said it too. Like it's a free resource for audiences and for your clients, which is a big pull to people do it. It's just a more intimate way to get your content across. Like you can sit there and write your Instagram post and make your reel and do all that. And those are important, but like there's something about, like this connection you make with people. And when you get to talk, and even though it's virtual and even though you're just listening to it, I just feel, and I've noticed that it's more intimate. You get the voice out of it, right? You get the expressions, and you don't get that when you read a post all the time. Sometimes you're like, what are they? Are they being happy? Are they being sarcastic? But like in a podcast, you can hear that, So like, I definitely agree. I think that's what makes it really unique for sure.
And I want to talk about the collaboration side of it. You've been part of over 50, I think a little bit over 50 podcasts that you have been part of, just with management launches. And, we said that statistic earlier that within the next 5 years, 80 million people are going to be doing home-based businesses. So let's talk a little bit about like the collaboration side, being on podcasts, like being a guest on a podcast, because that's also, for someone who's like, it's not my jam. I don't want to start one, but I think I can provide, education, and I can be of service for other podcasters. What have you seen with that, and for people to find, like how to find to get onto a podcast? Because I think a lot of people haven't never heard of podcasts still, which is crazy. And B, they don't even know where to start or begin to like be a guest on a podcast.
Yeah. So I think when we talked about doing this, I was like, this is like the perfect like topic platform to talk about this, because podcast collabing, if you're not doing it, you should. And just like Gio said, even if you don't have a podcast or it's not something you're interested in doing right now, at least go be a guest. What that does, and you said it perfectly, is you have to go into it with the mindset of that you are serving their audience. So I'll give you a little behind the scenes, something I used to do for a couple clients was I was doing their guest management. So like I would help calendar their interviews, I'd get it organized, and then I would do the emailing back and forth. We did a couple trial things where like we had a long list of potential people, and going to your question on how to find them, it was just people that were the same genre of podcast. It was people that was in their like entrepreneur world. This lady I did it with one time, she was more like a in between of mom business entrepreneur. So we were looking for people like that. We had very little success with me like doing a copy paste email. Hey, like come be on her show, blah, blah, blah. I'm her podcast manager. As much as I tried to make it professional and sound really awesome, we even had a nice media kit for her. we weren't getting a lot back. But what I found was more successful was the one-on-one and being very specific. So what I've started doing, if clients want help with that, my offer to people is I will help you get a list together, but you are in charge of talking to people because you will have more success that way. And I have advised them, like, you know, you need to go on, and this is something you're gonna have to spend time with. Go to their podcast, find their latest couple of interviews. Don't have to listen to the whole thing, but get a vibe for it. Find the one you like and connect with them that way. I loved your last episode on this, and I actually have a business that teaches XYZ. I would love to come on and talk about this on your show. I think I'd be a great asset to your audience. They're going to love that way more than just like, I want to come on your show because I'm trying to find podcasts, you know, like, so, and that's just a basic like collab advice and kind of a way to do that. But like, it benefits so much. And then what that does is it just gets you to other audiences. It gets you to people like who might listen to this today and be like, I didn't know all that about podcasts. Like, hey, come talk to me. Like, I'm here, you know, like I'm happy to talk to you about it. But had I not come on here, people may have not known, or they would have just like, cool, they have a podcast and, you know, this on YouTube. And so it opens up these doors for people to not only be educated, but also make those connections and open their eyes to possibilities for themselves. Like maybe they go on a couple of shows and they're like, oh, that was really fun. Now I want to start one, and it opens all these doors and opportunities that people don't realize. And something I wanted to like get in before I forget is that I feel like people, I hear this a lot lately, and some people ask me this, and I don't know if people watching or listening, the three of us were in Nashville together about a month ago. And a couple of people asked me like, oh, like, don't you think that podcast, like, it's just so saturated? Like there's so many. And I said, how many songs do you know that are about love? You know, like how many songs do we listen to about love? Do you listen to every artist that sings about love? Well, no, because you connect with different artists and different lyrics and music, and you feel that differently. So it's the same with the podcast. There are so many mompreneur podcasts and mom podcasts and entrepreneur and health, like all the categories.
Mindset.
Yes, there's a ton. But I'm not going to listen to so-and-so because I don't feel that. I don't get the vibe. It's not my person. Same on the other end. I might have these top 3 podcasts I love to listen to because they just get me. Like I listen to it and I'm like, these are my people. And so when people say that, I'm like, nobody else is you. So you cannot take away that like, well, I can't start another podcast about businesses. And I'm like, but does anyone sound like you, talk like you, vibe like you, teach what you teach the way you teach it? No. Yeah. So it's
your story connects with somebody out there that's
with somebody. And so like, I just don't want that to hold anybody back when they're listening. Like, oh, well, there's already so many. Well, there's one you. And so like when I got past that, I had a podcast for about 1.5 years. A lot of people asked me why I stopped it. It was more just honestly a business move. I had a podcast that was called Legit Motherhood. I loved doing it. It was very open, raw about motherhood. We did a lot of really fun topics. It wasn't aligned with the podcast business at the time. And as we are talking about, it takes a lot of time. And so as I'm managing other people's, I was having a hard time managing my own. And at the time didn't have quite the business to be able to pay it out. So I had to stop it, but I learned a lot of things from it. And that was one of them where I was so intimidated to get into the podcast market, but I was like, it doesn't matter. Like I'm talking to my group and my collab networks of women and moms, and that's going to touch these women and moms. And like, that's okay. Like that is what my purpose is of doing this. And so I want to leave that door open to people to not be afraid.
And don't you think there's a difference between, so like you said, the person that goes, well, I want to share something. There goes the train. I want to share something that is meaningful that I think will really help people. And it's kind of like their message, you know, maybe 1 or 2 podcasts, maybe 1 or 2 things that they want to share versus, wow, there's this huge topic and I can talk about this and this and this and this and this and we can be talking about this for hours. And I want to have people kind of like, to me, there's a difference between being a guest and having the right message that is really going to be impactful to a lot of people that need to hear it or want to hear it versus that you have an actual podcast where week after week after week you're having topics.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think that Yeah, because if you're like this, I mean, this is so open and versatile as far as what you can talk about with collaborations and the things you can bring on here. It just makes sense. But I also know you too, and I know you guys have things that you could go talk about specifically, you know, to other people, and that's just as valuable because you're offering like your expertise in those bits, you know what I mean? And so like there's value to both, basically. What you're saying is, yeah.
I mean, I can see that with Just Engage University. I didn't have guests on for the first year because I didn't know anybody. So it was literally taking other people's experiences and bringing them to life. And it was, I mean, podcasts don't have to be an hour. They were like 15, 20 minutes. And it was just like about guests not RSVPing or, you know, like what a proper timeline looks like. It was so useful for all couples that it was like, okay, it would be wrong of me not to have this podcast because I'm not serving them. And, you know, even if they didn't book with me, I mean, I remember doing it because I would have these conversations with them while we were trying to book the wedding. And I was like, oh my God, forget the wedding. Like we got to go through all this other stuff. And now, you know, we've had and especially through COVID that our industry changed. We've had so many people come on. So there is like it's a dual purpose. It is like, hey, let me give you my experiences, couple experiences, and then let me bring on some guest experts to hear their story. Because I will tell you, every single time I listen to an episode of any podcast, it has nothing to do with if you're coming on to sell yourself, you've lost me. Like it is something that's happened, an experience, a client's experience, a story that was like, oh my God, and that's how I found Julie Ciardi back in 2018, her story. And from then it was that connection. And that was before lives, before StreamYard, before Facebook Lives. And now that, you know, she does hers both ways as well, and how we decided to do ours 18 months ago, people have a human connection with us because they see us, they know us, they feel us. And people tell us all the time, like, thank you so much. Like I may have listened to 5 minutes of an episode, but I needed to hear that. And they can go back and again, it's a tool that they can go back and listen to. If you want to watch us, great. Like we think we're a little crazy and it's fine, but people love, like, they'll be like, oh my God, that one episode, and you had like that tech issue. Yeah, that was us. So I think it's important for people to understand, like, there is no like taking a class on how to be a good podcaster. Like if you have something to give, if you're coming from a place of service, podcasting is for you. And if you don't feel like you can have that time or the investment, then go be a guest and see how that feels, and then go from there. I mean, there's a step-by-step process for this. And, you know, Haili is the expert to answer those questions, but just coming from us, I mean, we are so excited every single week to do this every Wednesday. Like it is an honor for us to have people on, to be able to talk. And honestly, it's so great to go to a networking event, because Yvette and I are very blessed to be, this is like networking. We go, we speak, like we were just talking about what you just said this morning. Someone asked us to come and speak at an event. I'm like, hey, we're going to go to the event first, meet these people before we even just show up and talk. Like, who are we talking to? Who's our audience, right? So same thing for podcasts. Don't go out there and just try to serve yourself and say, I'm going to get on 10 different podcasts, and you've never listened to the podcast you've been on. You have no idea who the host is. Like it is a relationship. You're building relationships with the podcaster and with their audience. And if it doesn't serve a purpose, you should not try to be on it. And if you are doing a podcast, again, just for the money aspect, there's no point, because you're not going to get anything out of it. I mean, and I hope you agree on, I'm sure you agree on that, but that's just how we feel when we do ours.
Yeah, no, definitely. I think that, well, and for one, I think I just talked to someone about this the other day, or someone posted about like podcasts are not going anywhere. And so like, there's so much opportunity wherever you are. So like, I loved how you said, like, maybe try it out as a guest first. And then if it's something you feel you want to add to your plate at some point, I think it's going to benefit you more than you realize. But you have to have that right mindset behind it, or it's going to just feel like a chore. It's going to feel like one more thing in your business that stresses you out. And that's the last thing you want. So
yeah, definitely. And I get this asked all the time, which it doesn't bother me anymore, because it was definitely my mindset, my paradigm was like, oh, like you do do you even make money? Like, is that a money making? I know. And I'm like, oh my God, like seriously? Yeah, we do, not directly from having an interview or the podcast, but again, it's a free tool and a resource for our clients, and it's a return on investment on our business. So and actually now that we've been doing this for a long time, we do have people who sponsor our podcast. That's, and I don't want people to hear this and go, oh my God, we can get paid. That took time. We have been doing this for a really long time. We also go live. We also have a YouTube channel. Like it's a whole thing. And now people know who we are and they're like, oh my God, this makes sense. That's another collaboration within a podcast. And someone's like, oh my God, I would love to sponsor your podcast. I would love to sponsor your episodes. And so YG Collaborations has been picked up by Ignite Her Mind because it aligns with the messaging that we do. But those are things that later on, as you invest in your business and you invest in your podcast, you're going to start finding sponsors. You're going to start finding people who want to come on and really, pay you for your services, because it is a service that we're giving. It isn't just the live and it's not just the social media. There's so much involved, which why we hired you. And so one of the things I wanted to talk about too is a lot of people through COVID have been doing Facebook Lives, right? Everyone's like, oh, I'm on Facebook Lives. And that's kind of live podcasting in our mind. And they've been guests on other people's Facebook groups. So do you advise that people have already been doing that? That's a really good, what's a client for you that would say, hey, I've been doing Facebook Lives, because that's already footage that they have that you can convert to podcasts. What do you say to the people out there who've been doing that for the last 16, 18 months?
Yeah, you can convert almost any video into the audio. It's actually not that hard to do. So, more power to you if you've already got it booked out. It makes my job easier, honestly, because then we've got everything we need and we don't have to wait on a week-to-week basis kind of thing. So, if you've got content that you feel like you could repurpose into a podcast, I don't know why you're not doing that already.
I don't think people know, because that's a thing. I'll go back out and send this episode out to a bunch of our friends who have huge groups and have been doing not only their own Facebook Lives that are content that either can be raw or edited, but they've had people on or they've been on other people's Facebook Lives to where that can be episodes. Because I think people don't realize that video can be converted into audio, and then that can be you could already have a set of 10 podcasts that from the past 2 year and a half that you can say, hey, Haili, I would love to hire you. I already have this. And then you can put them on a plan. Okay, going this is what we need going forward. You're kind of already ahead of the game, if that makes sense.
Yeah. And you guys mentioned this before. There's definitely value in the video that we are currently recording. It's two-part. You're just utilizing your content in multiple ways. So then that way you're not sitting there and having to start a whole podcast on all new things. Well, you've already got it. I think the other thing is, it's just like Yvette was saying at the beginning, there is so much flexibility with a podcast. I think sometimes people are intimidated with a video or a live because they're like, oh, I have to sit down and watch this. Well, with a podcast, you can do that when you're running. If you're a runner, I'm not, I'm a walker. If you're running, walking, if you are doing your dishes, if you're in the car, it's just so easy to do versus having to sit and feel like you have to watch a video. I know that that's valuable. I know people like that, and there's nothing wrong with that. I think that eventually that's above level. I think next is, you add your video or you do it all at once. Right. And so just if you're out there considering how to use your content you already have, or if that's something you want to do, really consider, if you're doing video right now, how you can turn that into a podcast. And, me and my team, we can help you get that set up so that it's successful as a podcast.
I love it.
Okay, I have 2 questions that I love when people ask me these questions, because it's kind of it gives you freedom, and it's not a negative, it's like a freedom. The first question is a couple tips and tricks or do's and don'ts when it comes to podcasting. I know Gio's helped me with the whole don'ts. You just have to learn. And then the second question is one of my favorite questions. If you could tell, it's kind of I just kind of want to tell you this. If you could tell people that wanting to do podcasts or do podcasts or whatever, what is something that you would want to say to the podcasting world? Kind of like when someone asks me, are there things that you wish you could tell your clients? It's here I can say whatever, because it's not a name. And let me give you some advice here. And no one asked me it's not like there's a personal person that this is associated to, but it's going to be advice that someone can glean on. So are there some tips and tricks, and is there something that you would love to tell the podcasting world or all of us in the podcasting world?
Yeah, big questions. So there's lots of tips and tricks. I'll give my little plug for my Instagram. I try to weekly at least give one of those tips. So at Haili Murch is where I do a lot of those. The ones that I would just say on here would kind of touch on things that I've already said. One would be if you are a business owner and you do not have a podcast, I highly recommend that you consider it, but when you are ready. So, come to me when you feel like you are ready to add that to your plate. Give me a month of your time to really do it. And then we talk about managing it, because I think that, like we've mentioned, this whole podcast, it is going to be so valuable for your audience. It might not be your initial money maker. But like Gio said, there are ways to monetize and utilize your podcast as it grows. You have to remember that it's a process. It's not going to be like that the first month after we have launched you. So be ready for the podcast. I think the other thing is, if you are a podcaster listening and you are still doing this by yourself, please consider outsourcing it. Like Gio said, you're going to save so much time that can go to like revenue, oh my gosh, I'm losing my words now, revenue-based activities that'll help your business grow, versus like, not that the podcast isn't, but if you're sitting there editing and doing your show notes and graphics, those are some of the things we'll take off your plate. So like, consider outsourcing. And I think the other thing is, don't be afraid to be a guest if you are not ready. But also, if you are a podcaster, one of the great ways to collaborate and grow your own podcast is to go on other podcasts. So it's like this exchange. So consider that. I could go on and on. There's a ton of tips and tricks I could give. I think the thing that I would tell the podcast world, and it might sound a little bit cheesy, but I just want everyone to remember that don't lose sight of why you're doing your podcast, because the core of it should be that you're giving value and service to your audience, or you have a really valuable message or story you want to share. And then I want you to remember that you are unique. You are what makes it unique. And you can do all these tips and tricks and things that even I post and tell you about, but at the core of it, you are what makes it different. And to own that, like, just own who you are and let that be what makes us successful, is because you're unique.
Oh, I love it. I love it. I hope that this episode has, I feel like it's going to speak to so many, and I can't wait to share it and send it out to, all of our friends who think, oh my God, I'm not gonna be able to do that. I'm like, you guys have been podcasting, you just didn't even know, like, you're doing it on a weekly basis. And then for people out there who are wanting to be guests on shows, like, we look for people all the time. Like, it's like, we are so excited every week to have a new guest. I think even for both podcasts, we are pretty full on our calendars, because people are ready to come out and tell their story. The podcast isn't about me and Yvette. It's about, again, how we can serve, what tools, what education we can give, and with both of our podcasts. So we're super excited to have this platform, and can't wait to see how you're gonna, really we've already taken it to the next level for us, but just help us grow. And we're gonna keep you on backstage, because we do have some stuff that we want to ask afterwards. But we want to thank you so much for coming on. You guys can reach Haili at Haili Murch anywhere. But if you have questions that you want to ask, you can send us DMs. This will be on YouTube forever, and then we'll have it on our podcast platforms in the next couple of weeks. Thank you so much, Haili, for coming on. I know you've answered.
It's so fun to talk to you.
Thank you.
Hold on backstage, and we'll be back with you in just a little bit. That was awesome.
Okay, the whole service thing, I was thinking back how when we did Uncut and Unleashed.
Yeah, that season 2.
Only reason we did Uncut and Unleashed is because we just wanted somehow, some way for the Houston area people to get, or actually, I guess it kind of turned into nationwide, but what in the world is going on during COVID with weddings and how, like, all the changes and the yes and no's and mask and no mask and mandate and it was like it was a circus sideshow, and it was like, we can't go anywhere. So the only place we can get this cohesive information in order to help everybody with their weddings was to do a podcast. And then I mean, oh my gosh, I think back to all the changes and the things. So that, I guess it just goes back to say, it doesn't have to be perfect, and it really doesn't matter, because really it was just a service. Yeah. And in that service, I know, is when I learned a lot, but I mean, it really was just hey, you guys, this is what's going on in the world right now with COVID, and we just need to get this out to you. Remember when we, I'd called the county, I think, just to find out like what is even open for people to go get their marriage certificates. Like that was a big question.
We really have a timeline in history of how the nation changed our industry. It really did. And we had people from Canada, we had people from Australia. Like it wasn't just the United States, but I go back to season 2 and I think, oh my God. And I'm glad we did it live because I mean, there were days, y'all, that we were in our pajamas. Like it was rough. I remember telling you that like some weeks, I'm like, I can't, like, we didn't know what was going to happen to our businesses at that time. Like, I'm like, we got, we have clients postponed. Like it was, but it's
people were mad at us for some of the things we were saying too. Like, I can't believe you guys are on that. No, we need to be real with what's going on. And we can't candy coat or hide the reality, like contracts, how to do a contract. What are people going to do with deposits?
All of the things. So yeah, I mean, and we just said, hey, we woke up and we said, we're going to do this. And now, season 3 is kind of like the new way of wedding planning, which it's crazy. Like season 1 was educational. Season 2 was shit's real. And season 3 is welcome to the new way of planning events. And I'm so thankful to have that because even though Uncut and Unleashed, I would say like the pandemic and that we're still in a pandemic, like there's a lot of things from those episodes that we still do now and use now. I also think it just goes back to people connecting with us, understanding that we're coming from a place of service, that we also have businesses, but we did take the time to do that. And we didn't stop. We didn't stop now that we're busy again. Now that we're doing, events every weekend, we're still doing it. We're still committed to doing it and serving in a different way, serving in a way that people need us to. And we don't know what that is. Like, don't think that like every Wednesday we have a topic. We're lucky we have amazing guests, but the weeks that we don't have guests, we're like, you know what? Why don't we talk about something that just happened last week? Or when we came back from Nashville, we talked about our conference. When we came back from Las Vegas, we talked about our conference. And people are like, oh my God, thank you. Like, I haven't even gone to a conference. I haven't even, like, again, there are still people in the United States that are still haven't like done an event, gone to do things, even been to a networking event. Like they're still doing everything virtually. So, this doesn't have to be extremely planned, but it does have to come from your heart and from the place that you want to give to your clients. So if you love this episode, oh my God, we would love a review. We would love for you to subscribe to our YouTube channel. And if you're listening on the platforms, share, because for us to find other collaborators like you, other amazing women in the business who want to learn more about collaborations, and anyone that's interested in being on that, again, serves our audience and really just have a passion for collaborations, please DM us because we would love to have you on. We have some amazing episodes coming up. So again, if you're listening to us here or watching us, thank you again. Anything else you want to say before we go?
No, great episode. Love it, love it, love it.
All right. Well, we will see you next week. And it was wonderful talking to everyone. Bye.
Bye.